Picture this. It's 3 a.m. Your house is dead quiet, and you're tucked in bed thinking you're safe. Then you hear it. A creak, a whisper, or maybe a knock that doesn't belong. Your heart races, your palms sweat, and suddenly the place you call home feels like a trap. Welcome to our channel, where we dive into the darkest quarters of real-life nightmares. I'm your friends, and tonight we're peeling back the curtain on 7 terrifying home invasion stories that'll make you rethink leaving that window cracked or that door unlocked. These aren't just tales of break-ins. They're stories of fear that lingers, of shadows that don't belong, and of moments that'll haunt you long after the lights are back on. Some of these were sent in by you, our viewers, and others come from real accounts that'll make your skin crawl. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll be checking every lock in your house. And if you've got a story that's kept you up at night, send it to insert our email. It might just make it into our next video. Grab a blanket, dim the lights, and let's dive into the fear. Story 1. The Man in the Basement. Our first story comes from a viewer named Sarah, who sent this in from Ohio. This happened back in the summer of 2019, when Sarah was 24 and living alone in a small rental house on the outskirts of her hometown. It was one of those old houses, creaky floors, drafty windows, and a basement that gave her the creeps. Sarah wasn't big on ghost stories, but she avoided that basement like the plague. It was unfinished, with rusty pipes, a single flickering light bulb, and a vibe that just felt wrong. She used it for storage and nothing else. But one night, that basement became the heart of a nightmare she'd never shake. Sarah worked late shifts at a diner, so she'd usually roll into her driveway around 2 a.m., bone-tired. On this night, she pulled up and noticed something off. Her front porch light, which she always kept on, was out. She figured the bulb had crapped out. Old house, old wiring, right? She grabbed her keys, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. The house was dead quiet, but there was this weird smell, like wet dirt mixed with something sharp, almost metallic. She brushed it off, locked the door, and headed to the kitchen for a glass of water. As she filled her glass, a low, muffled thump echoed from below. The basement. Her heart skipped a beat. She froze, straining her ears. Another thump, then a faint scraping, like something heavy dragging across the concrete. Sarah's first thought was an animal. Maybe a raccoon or a stray cat had gotten in. The basement had an old rusty exterior door she never used, so it wasn't impossible. Against her gut, screaming at her to stay put, she grabbed a flashlight from a drawer and decided to check it out. She crept to the basement door, her hand shaking as she turned the knob. The stairs groaned under her weight, and the air got colder with every step. When she hit the bottom, she flicked on the flashlight, sweeping the beam across the cluttered space. Boxes, old furniture, a busted lawnmower, everything looked normal. But that smell was stronger now, choking her. She called out, "Hello, anyone there?" Her voice bounced off the walls, unanswered. Then, from the far corner, the operator told her to stay calm and lock herself in a room until the cops got there. Minutes later, sirens wailed outside. Sarah hid in her bedroom, clutching a kitchen knife, listening for any sound from below. The police searched the whole house, top to bottom. They found the basement's exterior door slightly ajar with fresh scratches around the lock. But no one was there. No footprints, no fingerprints, nothing. The cops said it was probably a homeless guy looking for shelter, but Sarah wasn't buying it. That chuckle, that smell, it wasn't right. For weeks after, she'd wake up to faint thumps from the basement, but she never went back down. She moved out a month later, and the landlord told her the next tenant complained about the same smell and refused to use the basement. Who or what was down there that night, Sarah still doesn't know, and she prays she never finds out. The knocking at 3 a.m. This next story comes from a guy named James who shared this chilling experience from 2021. James lived in a quiet suburb in Texas with his wife Emily and their 2 kids. Their house was your average 2-story deal. Nothing fancy, but it was their first home, and they were stoked. That is, until the knocking started, turning their safe haven into a house of dread. It kicked off on a Tuesday night in October. James and Emily were fast asleep when a loud, deliberate knock jolted them awake. 3 sharp raps on the front door. Evenly spaced, James checked his phone. 3:02 a.m. He figured it might be a neighbor with an emergency, so he grabbed a baseball bat and crept downstairs. Emily stayed upstairs peeking out the bedroom window. She whispered that she couldn't see anyone outside. No car, no person, nothing. James inched toward the door, his heart pounding like a drum. He peered through the peephole, pure darkness. No one was on the porch. He flicked on the outdoor light, but it didn't help. The street was empty, silent as a grave. Thinking it might be some dumb kids pulling a prank, he went back to bed, but neither he nor Emily could shake the bad feeling. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same 3 knocks. This time, James didn't mess around. He swung the door open, bat in hand, ready to confront whoever it was. But the porch was... On the 8th night, he stayed up, glued to the live feed on his phone. At 3 a.m., the knocks hit. Loud, unmistakable. But the camera showed nothing. No figure, no movement. Just an empty porch. James was starting to think it wasn't a person at all. Emily wanted to call the cops, But what could they say? Help, our door's knocking itself? On the 9th night, things went from creepy to terrifying. The knocking came, but it didn't stop at 3. It was a full-on pounding, like someone was trying to bust the door down. James grabbed the bat and yelled, "Who's there? I've got a weapon." The pounding stopped, and then came a low, rasping whisper from the other side. "Let me in." It wasn't human. It sounded like it was filtered through static. Emily, who'd come downstairs, screamed and ran to check on the kids. They were okay, but the house felt wrong, like it wasn't theirs anymore. The police showed up that night, but they found nothing, no footprints, no signs of tampering. The camera footage showed static for exactly 30 seconds during the pounding, even though the device was fully charged. James and Emily crashed at her parents' place for a week, and when they came back, the knocking stopped. But James swears he sometimes hears a faint tap from inside the walls, like something's still waiting to be let. Story 3. The Stranger in the Attic. This story was sent in by a viewer named Rachel, who lived through this nightmare in 2017 in upstate New York. Rachel was a single mom raising her 6-year-old daughter, Lily, in a cozy but isolated house surrounded by woods. The place had an attic accessible only by a pull-down ladder where Rachel stored Christmas decorations and old clothes. She hardly ever went up there, and Lily was too little to climb the ladder. But one night, Lily's innocent question turned Rachel's world upside down. It was a chilly November evening. Rachel was tucking Lily into bed when her daughter looked up and asked, "Mommy, who's the man in the attic?" Rachel laughed it off, thinking it was just the kid's wild imagination. But Lily was dead serious, saying she'd heard footsteps pacing above her room at night. Rachel's stomach dropped. She'd heard creaks before, but blamed the old house settling. To calm Lily down, she promised to check the attic. That night, after Lily was asleep, Rachel pulled down the attic ladder. A musty, freezing gust of air hit her face. She climbed up, flashlight in hand, and scanned the cramped space. At first, it looked fine. Boxes, cobwebs, the usual. But then her light caught something in the corner. A sleeping bag, rolled out neatly, with a pillow and a half-empty water bottle next to it. Her heart raced. Someone had been living up there. She backed down the ladder, locked the attic, and called the cops. When they arrived, they found more than just a sleeping bag. There were food wrappers, a small knife, and a notebook with sketches of the house's layout, including Lily's room circled in red. The police searched the property but found no one. The attic's tiny window was unlatched, suggesting someone had been coming and going. They dusted for prints but got nothing usable. The worst part? Lily said she'd seen the man peeking through her window a week earlier, but Rachel had thought it was just a bad dream. Rachel and Lily stayed with a friend while the cops kept an eye on the house, but no one was ever caught. Rachel sold the place a year later, but she still checks Lily's room every night, haunted by the thought of someone watching them from above.
Story 4: The Face at the Window. Our next story comes from a guy named Ethan who shared this terrifying experience from 2020 in Florida. Ethan was a college student, renting a ground floor apartment near campus. It was a cheap place with big windows that looked out onto a quiet street. Ethan liked the sunlight, but he'd soon wish he'd sprung for better blinds. One night in March, Ethan was up late studying for finals, around 1 a.m. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of his laptop. He was at his desk, facing the window, when he caught a reflection in the glass. It wasn't his face, it was someone else's, pressed right up against the window, staring at him with wide, unblinking eyes and a creepy, twisted smile. Ethan spun around, thinking someone was behind him, but the room was empty. When he looked back at the window, the face was gone. Shaken, Ethan yanked the blinds shut and checked every lock. He told himself it was a trick of the light or maybe some jerk pulling a prank. But the next night, it happened again. This time, he heard a faint tap on the glass before seeing the face. Same pale skin, same creepy smile. Ethan grabbed his phone to snap a picture, but by the time he got the camera open, the face was gone. He called the cops, who patrolled the area but found nothing. They told him to get a security system. Ethan set up a cheap camera outside his window, but the face kept showing up, always at random times, always vanishing before he could catch it. The worst night came a week later. Ethan woke to scratching, like nails dragging across the glass. He checked the camera feed and saw the figure standing there, staring. But this time, the camera caught a second figure, crouched in the shadows, holding what looked like a knife. Ethan screamed and called 911. The police showed up fast, but both figures were gone. The footage was corrupted, showing only static. Ethan moved out the next month, but he still dreams about that face, wondering if it was human or something else, staring through the glass.
Story 5: The Unlocked Back Door. This story was sent in by a viewer named Maria, who lived through this nightmare in 2018 in California. Maria and her husband Carlos had just moved into a new house in a gated community, thinking it was the safest spot to start their family. But one tiny mistake turned their dream home into a house of fear. It was a warm August night, and Maria was home alone while Carlos was on a business trip. She'd gone to bed early, around 10 p.m., double-checking all the doors and windows. Maria was paranoid about security, especially in a new place, but around 3 a.m., she woke to footsteps downstairs. They were slow, careful, like someone was trying not to make a sound. Her heart pounded. She grabbed her phone, hid in the closet, and dialed 911, whispering to the operator. As she waited, she heard the footsteps stop, then a faint creak. The back door opening. She was sure she'd locked it. The operator told her to stay put, but then Maria heard something worse, a low whistle, like someone casually strolling through her house. The whistling got closer, moving up the stairs. She clamped her hand over her mouth to keep from breathing too loud. Through a crack in the closet door, she saw a shadow pass by her bedroom.
The cops arrived 10 minutes later, their sirens scaring the intruder off. Maria heard a crash, like something heavy falling, then silence. The police found the back door wide open, with muddy footprints from the kitchen to the backyard. A lamp in the living room was knocked over, and a single black leather glove was left on the floor, not hers or Carlos's. They searched the neighborhood but found no one. The chilling part, the back door's lock was fine, meaning it had been unlocked from the inside. Maria and Carlos got a full security system the next week, but Maria never felt safe there again. She swears she still hears that whistle in her nightmares, wondering who or what was in her home.
Story 6. The Voice in the Walls. Our sixth story comes from a viewer named Daniel, who went through this in 2022 in a small town in Oregon. Daniel was a recent college grad renting a cheap duplex to save cash while job hunting. The place was old with thin walls and a shared vent system that carried sounds from the neighbor's side. His neighbor was a quiet older lady who kept to herself, so Daniel didn't mind. But one night, he heard something that made him question everything. It started on a rainy January evening. Daniel was watching TV when a faint voice came through the wall. It was muffled, like someone talking on the phone, but it didn't sound like his neighbor. It was deeper, rougher, and it wasn't speaking English. It sounded like gibberish or a chant. Daniel turned down the TV and listened. The voice stopped, replaced by a faint scratching, like nails on wood. He knocked on the wall, thinking it might be a pipe or an animal. The scratching stopped dead. The next night, the voice was back, louder. Daniel could make out words, but they didn't add up. Stuff like inside, now, and open it. He checked with his neighbor the next day, asking if she'd had company or heard anything weird. She looked confused and said she lived alone and hadn't heard a thing. That night, Daniel set up his phone to record audio while he slept. At 4 a.m., he woke to the voice again, now coming from the vent above his bed. It was clear this time. "You're not alone." Freaked out, Daniel grabbed a flashlight and checked the crawl space under the duplex where the vents connected. He found a pile of cigarette butts, a torn photo of the duplex with his window circled in red, and a sleeping bag. He called the cops, who found a knife and food wrappers down there too. The neighbor swore she'd never seen anyone, and the police couldn't find the intruder. Daniel moved out the next week, but he kept the recording. He says the voice still haunts his dreams. Story 7. The Family That Wasn't There. Our final story comes from a viewer named Claire, who sent this in from Colorado. This happened in 2023 when Claire and her boyfriend Mark moved into a new house in a rural area. It was a fixer-upper with a big yard and a guest room for Claire's parents to visit. They were pumped to start their new life, but something about the house felt off from day one. The first night, while unpacking, they heard laughter from the backyard, kids giggling, adults chatting, like a family having a barbecue. They looked out the window but saw nothing. The yard was empty, and the nearest neighbors were too far to hear.
They brushed it off as exhaustion or a distant party. But the next night, the laughter was closer, like it was coming from inside the house. Claire checked every room, but they were alone. A week later, things got weirder. Claire woke up to find the guest room door open, the bed made, and fresh towels folded on it, like someone had prepped it for guests. She hadn't touched the room, and Mark swore he hadn't either. That night, they heard footsteps upstairs, then a child's voice singing softly. Claire's heart sank. They didn't have kids. They grabbed a flashlight and checked the guest room. The towels were gone, and the bed was unmade, with small, muddy handprints on the sheets. Claire called the police, thinking someone had broken in. The cops found no signs of forced entry, but they discovered an old photo album in the attic, filled with pictures of a family Claire didn't know, standing in their backyard. The photos were 20 years old, but the family looked eerily familiar, like the people Claire had pictured during the laughter. The police said it was probably left by the previous owners.
And that's it. 7 terrifying home invasion stories that'll make you think twice about what's lurking in the dark corners of your home. From whispers in the walls to faces at the window, these stories remind us that safety is never guaranteed. If any of these gave you chills or made you check your locks, drop a comment below and let me know which one hit you the hardest. And if you've got your own creepy story, maybe a home invasion, a paranormal encounter, or something you can't explain, send it too in the comments box. We might feature it in a future video. Before you go, smash that like button if you're still here, and subscribe if you want more true scary stories every week. Hit the bell so you don't miss a single upload. What's the creepiest thing that's ever happened in your home? Share it in the comments. I read every one. Until next time, stay safe, lock your doors, and maybe keep a light on tonight. Good night.